In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Have you ever noticed or been that person who stops conversation by what you say or how you say it in a group? Or finds the person most like you at a social gathering when there are many different kinds of people around you? Is already thinking of a response when talking with someone who is sharing a very different point of view than yours. Or always refers in conversation to the people you know in your professional or social circles. Or perhaps you want everyone to just get along, by which you mean everyone thinks, believes, acts, speaks, and looks the same. There is a tendency within all our hearts to desire uniformity, where all people of the world look like us and reflect our values. After all, avoiding conflict is one of the most basic human defense mechanisms, and we can see uniformity as the possibility of peace, of everyone getting along, and that seems to be a good thing. The story of the Tower of Babel, we see the same tendency. To circle the wagons, to build a fortress, to keep the sameness contained, so that no one with new ideas about the world could come in, nor could those like us leave. However, recent Jewish scholarship on this story invites us to remember the context of this prehistorical story, to understand the sinfulness that God identified in the people building the tower to reach the heavens. The story of the Tower of Babel immediately follows the story when God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fertile and increase and fill the earth." Staying put, circling the wagons, creating and sustaining a homogeneous culture with one common language was working in opposition to God's command to fill the earth. Of course, we hear a similar commission in Matthew's gospel, declaring again God's desire that the earth be filled with faithful people, when the risen Lord says to the disciples, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." No one is being excluded from the blessings of God. So one can imagine God looking down from heaven, as the text tells us in our story of the Tower of Babel, or present within among the people descendant from Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and being alarmed what they saw was being created, a culture of gathering from within, a group of people blind to anything beyond their reach, their imaginations limited to the gifts already contained within their group, with no new ideas brought in for consideration, where individual thought or diversity of opinion would be crushed, where sameness was all that they desired. The people of Babel created an existence which was comfortable, stable, and familiar. This intention to build or live in groups that reward sameness also appears when the disciples gathered themselves in the locked room in Jerusalem. They were the only ones who truly knew the horror of the implication of Jesus' death, and they wanted to stay together, partly for protection, but also to reinforce the shared experience of their walk with Jesus, to remind themselves that it was actually real, and to keep the language that Jesus had taught them alive, which seemed to have been brought to a complete stop at his crucifixion. It's not unlike the pockets of people or the neighborhoods that developed in our cities as immigrants arrived in our country during the early development as a nation, or those who come here now, whether driven by economic necessity, or desire for religious freedom, or escape from ethnic persecution. It seems we often use geographic boundaries to separate people into homogeneous communities. so sane people can live with sane people, and never the twain shall meet. When I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the language used to separate were those people who lived on the wrong side of the tracks, the physical railroad tracks that actually separated the town. Or in Lancaster, even though the church I worshiped and worked in was 2 blocks from the city center, the message was stay away from those people who live on the south side of King Street. Most likely we all grew up with a similar frame of mind, namely that people can and should be separate based on what they look like or how they spoke or something else about them that defined them as the other. There was a societal pressure to stay within your group, to not marry outside your tribe, and an equal pressure to keep the others out. Sadly, I remember as a child, adults vividly remarking when the first African-American family moved into an all-white neighborhood. And the comments were not positive. With each one of those derogatory judgments spoken, I believe God's heart broke a bit. For we all know that enforced separateness is not the intention of God, as we hear in our story today. God, however, in God's wisdom, disrupted the fervently sought-after uniformity in the community of Babel. God confused the people's speech, and without a common language, the peoples were scattered to the ends of the earth. And God's desire for the earth to be filled, not just with people, but filled with diversity, as can be evident in the creatures of the natural world, it was now true for humankind. The story of the Tower of Babel is illustrative of the force of God, which disrupts the order that we have placed upon and in our lives that can feel so comfortable. And yet God throws us into chaos for a bit so that new ideas can emerge and broader understandings can settle into our hearts, and our reach for assistance to those who are other than us can become our response to God's faithful invitation to find an order within our lives that is aligned with God's intention. Jewish scholars have been exploring this text over time and have come to a compelling understanding of the message of the truth in this story. Rabbi Hirsch, a 19th century scholar, states that, regarding this story, we learn here that the Torah not only welcomes diversity, but insists upon it. Likewise, contemporary theologian Isaiah Rothstein states, it is not only our duty to welcome in the other because it feels like the right thing to do, but more so because God's intentions were never to produce a world of uniformity, but rather strengthen us to call far and wide for a world of diversity. So here's an interesting piece, which begins to lay the foundation of how this call to align with God's intention toward diversity connects to the movement of the Holy Spirit on this feast day of Pentecost. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a French Jesuit priest who lived until 1955, was trained as a paleontologist and a geologist, and he made a very bold statement. Love is the very physical structure of the universe. For Teilhard, gravity, atomic bonding, orbits, cycles, photosynthesis, ecosystems, force fields, electromagnetic fields, human physical attraction, friendship, animal instinct, and evolution all reveal an energy that is attracting all things and beings to one another, in a movement toward even greater complexity and diversity, and yet ironically also toward unification at even deeper levels. This energy is quite simply love, under very different forms. Now, one might expect this statement about love as the basis of the universe from a theologian, but this is a pretty astounding statement from a scientist, that love is the driving force behind all aspects of the universe, and that it is a call toward each other, and at the same time summons us toward a greater complexity and diversity. Well, that sure sounds a whole lot like God's intention, as portrayed in the story of the Tower of Babel. A call toward each other, but away from sameness, and toward many languages, many ways to speak God's truth, many ways to live faithfully to the ends of the earth. We may begin to understand that the divine love which permeates our universe is that which draws us toward that which is not us. That person at the party most unlike us. That other person's opinion that causes a visceral reaction within our being. That person who is thinking outside our box and who calls forth from us great energy to stretch and learn their language. The divine love which permeates our universe invites us to extend ourselves beyond ourselves. Now this can make our egos squirm a bit, because it forces us to give up our separation, and with that any sense of superiority or control. The divine love which permeates our universe is drawing us towards God's intention of a world where everyone does not look the same, or speak the same, believe the same, or act the same. So what if we imagine this divine love, this energy within all created things that draws us together one unto each other, with all our differences just sparkling as clear as the light on the crest of a wave as it rolls into the shore? What if that is what landed on everybody's head, as is portrayed in our story from Power, to the band of Jesus followers to translate divine love so it can be spoken in all the languages of the world, for the gospel to be told in every language and circumstance, to build Christianity facing toward God's intention of cultural diversity and complexity. So let us embrace the divine love that flows through us and through all of creation, uniting us at a depth that we cannot, as humans, perceive, and which we find through the glorious diversity of creation and humankind. Amen.